Friends, the questions I may be able to answer or I may not be able to answer. We'll see as they come up what we can say. The first one says, do you think there has been a slowdown in the growth of the faith in the West? If yes, what can be the reason and what can be done about it? I would like to suggest that the whole content of what I was trying to convey this evening has to do with this question. It has slowed down. It isn't growing the way it was in the Crusade or earlier stages. It needs to be accelerated. I think that the reason the things the Guardian says about prayer meditation, study, and action apply just as well now as they did then. It's the question that somehow we've become maybe distracted with some of the secondary aspects of the mechanics of things, which are very important, but they have to be fired with these spiritual principles. So the life plan that Baha'u'llah gives us in his writings needs to reinforce our efforts in the 5-year plan. And we have to be aware of both these dimensions in our lives. And if there's emphasis by the institutions on certain actions in the outside world, it doesn't mean lessen your personal goals in relation to Baha'u'llah's revelation that he's given us, that are the laws of the Aqdas, that are the essential spiritual pillars, if you will, of our lives. When is the lesser peace achieved? There's another quote, let's see, there's another one here about lesser peace also. Can you elaborate on the lesser peace, which was to come before the end of the last century? How do the Pilgrim notes regarding the future of America play into that? I can't tell you exactly. There's a lot of Pilgrim notes, and I think we all understand the nature of Pilgrim. It's very inspiring, but we can't fully rely on them. Now, the source of the promise of the lesser peace is in several places. It's mostly in oral statements of the Master. And we don't know the reason that we didn't have something like that happen at the end of the last century. The House of Justice, reflecting and considering the matter, discussed it in great length in the Holy Land. Also, I was present during those periods, those years. And it has taken the meeting of the world leaders in 1992, where they all pledged peace. They talked about peace as the opening, if you will, of a process that will necessarily take time and learning on the part of the nations until they're able to achieve this consolidation, if you will. And possibly it will have to go through more calamitous periods for mankind to awaken and be able to let loose of this obsession with nationalism and of the nation states and of politics as a solution. So we all need to be patient. The processes that Shoghi Effendi has described in his messages, apart from this question of what's the date of the lesser peace, can you imagine lesser peace being on one day? I don't think it's not a one-day affair. That those processes of disintegration and integration are going on, and the situation, the chaos in the world gets worse. And the vibrating influence of the New World Order of Baha'u'llah that is announced in the Aqdas is acting and tearing down the barriers to Baha'u'llah's goals. And politics plays into that. We don't enter into politics in the sense of discussing them and criticizing figures. We should be careful that we don't do any of that. But it doesn't mean we don't stay alert and we don't read the newspapers and we don't listen to the news. Shoghi Effendi read 4 newspapers a day and used to carry articles out of them and That was reflected into his work. But we should see the events of the outside world within the context of the vision that Baha'u'llah has given us and what Abdu'l-Baha has talked about when he was in America. And be cautious that we don't get divided ourselves because we like this political leader and you like that political leader. As far as I can understand, friends, the world order of Baha'u'llah, Shoghi Effendi said, is going to be built on the ashes of the old world order. So don't waste too much time trying to fix the old world order, because it's not going to come to anything, as this is the promises we have in the faith. This is a plea for help, I think, that needs to go to your institutions here. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, we will be losing our only family with children. We are 30 strong, but are praying for families. Please advise. Turn to your institutions. Find some friends with children to come. Where does study of the Ruhi books fit in with the study of the texts of the faith? Well, certainly it fits in, friends. The Ruhi books were designed because we had a whole lot of Baha'is that didn't know anything about the faith. And so the House of Justice felt we needed training, some training that was gradual too. Some of the texts are more difficult to chew on. So these Ruhi books gradually bringing people along. And I think you'll notice, if you particularly reflect on it, there are a number of passages in the Ruhi books that say you must have your own individual program of study. We're not giving up study of the Revelation to study the Ruhi books. The Ruhi books are there. We've been told they're not obligatory, but certainly encouraged to study them. And if we're active in the community, we want to know what's in the contents of them. Now, the later books are becoming quite closer to deepening on various important subjects that the organizers of the Ruhi materials have considered. And so they do provide us with a form of deepening. But it's not as broad as this, as I think that's what we're reviewing from the letters of the Guardian. And some people say, oh, the Guardians, that was for that time, and this is for this time. No, friends, we've got to combine the two. You can't say the Revelation has changed or the meaning of it has changed. But Shoghi Effendi didn't understand what he was doing. Some things were strategy. The goals of Shoghi Effendi to go out and open the 130 territories, that's past. But the advice of Shoghi Effendi to use prayer and meditation and study, that's not, how is that going to pass? Not going to pass. So bear it in mind and encourage. If we don't have teaching, if we're not, the call of Baha'u'llah is the duty of every Baha'i is to teach and to make it the center of their lives. Center your energies, it was quoted here, center your energies in the propagation of the faith of God. There's nothing you can do with your lives that's more important than that. And there's no footnotes in the text of Baha'u'llah that says that this thing of teaching is for people who are beautiful or handsome or rich or well-educated. It doesn't have any kind of details like that. The most humble of Baha'is can oftentimes be the means of propagating the cause. We had one teacher in Bluefields in Nicaragua, a guy that was so enthusiastic. He loved the Baha'is, he loved the pioneers, he loved the faith. He would go out and talk about there's a new religion. He said, it's terrific. It's the answer to everything. They said, what's the name of it? He said, I can't remember the name of it. But who was the teacher? Who was the founder? I can't remember the name. But I can take you to the people who know. And he would bring people to the pioneers, and we'd have. So there's no minimum knowledge. But obviously, if we have capacity to read and study, we need to increase our understanding of the faith. No end to it. And then in a couple of letters, Shoghi Effendi said to new Baha'is, he said, I hope you'll use your leisure time to intensely study the literature of the cause, the text of the faith. And in one of them, he says, I hope you will find a couple hours a day to read the writings of Baha'u'llah. Friends, what would happen to the Baha'i world if we all read the writings more? I think we'd find we'd be a terrific change. I look at that and I think, what will happen to me if I read 2 hours a day? And I make my pledge and I start, and about 10 minutes later I'm asleep. That's weakness of old age. But if you've got youth and vitality, try to increase the amount of time that you spend in the text. The texts inform the meaning of the text. The more you read, the more you begin to see the combinations and connections between the things that Baha'u'llah is saying. And then it becomes increasingly fascinating. Challenging at first, but increasingly fascinating. Is it okay if you pray while you drive? Or pray while you're in bed? Well, about the bed one, I've heard various opinions, that I don't want to come down on one or the other. I know some people that say that that's the best way for them to pray. They pray in bed when they first wake up in the morning, they start praying. Of course, they're not reading the book necessarily. They're praying for memorized prayers, or they're using the greatest name. And I don't know, we have different approaches in life. The Easterners have one approach, and the Westerners have another approach. They have to blend, but we also have to have tolerance for each other. So if your child says they're praying in bed because it's cold and they don't want to get out of bed, well, they're praying. That's good. Let's see where it goes from there. As to driving, well, I think you better ask your regional council. Some things I'm not willing to answer. I don't know why you couldn't say the greatest name. My wife, everywhere she drives, she's saying, Yalbaho Laba. That's because I'm driving. That's why she... Could you, by any chance, make a speech about the equality of genders? That's very kind. There's a lot, this gender issue has become so central now in society. But I think we have to remember that before we're either male, female, or the other 70 gender forms that they're talking about these days, we're human souls. The soul, Baha'u'llah says, doesn't have any gender. It acquires gender when it's attached to this physical world. Then it takes on either the male or female soul. So spirituality is the center of everything, no matter how we may view ourselves or how others may view us. And this is very important. I remember the House of Justice, it didn't like this question of category of gays. You had human souls that had failings, or they were engaged in homosexual activities, or they were engaged in robbing banks, or whatever things they were doing. Not that that's equivalent. But the question is that first and foremost, our goals are spiritual, and that the laws of Baha'u'llah, the teachings that he gives, are given to us by an omnipotent, omniscient God who tells us what we need in order to survive and grow spiritually. And so if they say some things that is not convenient, because I like to drink wine with my dinner or whatever it is, we have certain things we're going to have to give up. This is not an easy question, but I think that answering that before we're categorized as this kind of sexual being or that kind of sexual being, we have to remember that we're human souls and we're responsible to our Creator for our actions. So I don't know what else I can say. I can't give a real speech on that, but that was pretty much of a speech anyway. So, good evening. Could you give us a few pointers on how to address getting the racial issues and greater diversity issues in our communities? This is as important as it has been in the years when Shoghi Effendi first spoke of it, in the advent of divine justice. It's still a great challenging issue, and more, I think we should inform ourselves with the kind of things that are on YouTube and various documentary films, which are bringing to light certain aspects of the relationship of American society to the race issues, and some of the claims that slavery's taken on different colors. It's changed in its character, and we need to think about the prejudices and things that are still inherent in our society. And then we need to reread the Advent of Divine Justice, those passages about the solutions that Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi provide for us. Sometimes our knowledge of these racial things is out of ignorance. We say, what's the big deal? I don't see a problem. I mean, particularly the dominant race. But the more that you hear about the experiences and follow the history that's now being documented, the more you realize there's a lot more to it than what apparently we thought was sufficient. This question has to do with many of the friends, especially those that English is a second language, feel scared and intimidated to reach out to the wider community. What is your experience? What's a good way for a Homefront pioneer to motivate, encourage in a loving way his or her Baha'i brothers and sisters? Thank you. When I was a new Baha'i, friends quoted something from the Master that I haven't seen since, but it makes such good sense. They said that Abdu'l-Baha said, if you're going to see a person once, deliver the message. Mention the faith, mention Baha'u'llah. You're on the streetcar, you're in a bus, you're on a plane. You've never seen this person again. And it's awkward, you don't know how to do it. Think about how to bring up the subject. I was on a flight coming to Austin. I asked the woman next to me, I said, I'm going to Austin. Are you from Austin? I'm going to visit the Baha'is there. Do you know any Baha'is there? What? But I'll find some way. But he says, if you're going to see a person or individual more than once, live the life. Shower loving kindness on them, because then it's so much easier for your words to penetrate them. You know, you've just moved into a new apartment house, you're walking down the aisle, the hall, and you see these people, your neighbors come out of their door, and you rush up to them and say, have you heard of Baha'u'llah? No. So it's more forming friendships with people. I've heard something very strange. In California, you can hear all kinds of strange things. Anyway, one of the things they said was we don't have time for friendship, friends. Do the plan, do the goals. Friends, the whole essence of the faith is friendship, is unity, is closeness of souls. We have to have time for friendship. We have to be friendly with people. We need to be friendly in order to attract them, to hear the message, and to enjoy our company, and to be part of their activities. Have all the writings of Baha'u'llah been translated and released? No. I think presently it's about 11% of Baha'u'llah's writings. But I've seen tablets of Baha'u'llah to individuals that send greetings, and then they ask, would you go to the second block above the mosque in Constantinople and buy some of that white cheese and send it for us? And then he adds on, blessed is your father, for he's embraced it, I don't know, and there's some divine truth in that tablet at the same time. So the House of Justice is choosing extracts. Shoghi Effendi has given us, with his power of divine interpretation, translations and choices. If you master the Gone, the Gleanings, prayers and meditations on the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf, then ask this question again. But never mind Baha'u'llah, we have a brand new volume. Have you seen the new volume? What is it? The Days of His Remembrance, I think. In the Days of His Remembrance is the title that the House of Justice just published. All new texts about the holy days that we haven't seen before. Some of them are repeated in the volume so that they're all in one place. But there are marvelous things about the Rizwan. Rizwan becomes something far beyond what we could have imagined, I think, in the West anyway. Is it a waste of time to pioneer to a wealthy or affluent cluster with no Baha'is? I should hardly think so. You can pioneer wherever you want to pioneer. Where there are people, there's going to be needs. If you're more comfortable amongst the affluent, you probably have some affluence yourself if you're going to ask that question. That's all right. We need all types in the faith. We need everybody. That doesn't mean that the council is going to necessarily designate those neighborhoods as the most receptive. That might not be it. You're still free to pioneer there. Question from Baha'i parents about how to help young adults, the youth who've been reared in the faith and have a Baha'i soul and sensitivity but are estranged from the faith and now acutely distressed by the intensity of dark forces but seemingly helpless to extricate themselves. Friends, there's a quotation from a letter of the Guardian where he says that dark forces are real. And if you collect from the writings of Shoghi Effendi the references to the forces of darkness, I think you'll be able to create a list of about 30 of them. At the top there, none of these are psychic, spiritualistic, strange things, ghosts or anything. That's not what we're talking about dark forces. It's the dark forces are the reality of materialism and the various dimensions of it that settle into the human soul and keep it distracted so it doesn't look at spiritual matters. So the greatest enemy of the cause, Shoghi Effendi said, is materialism. Strange, huh? It's a philosophy. I mean, besides the acquisition of goods, it puts the judgment of people based on how many possessions they have. Oh, that's a very important person, you know. He has a big farm and he has cars and he has it's so subtle, but it's all in our society, and we still are thinking from that point of view. So we have to try to get that. When the question here is that these dark forces have taken possession, Shoghi Effendi says they can possess us and block out spiritual vision. But he says we do have the capacity and power to overcome them. But it takes a great effort. And maybe your prayers will help them. But I remember one of the Baha'i serving at the World Center, he had his son who was negating God while he was there. He was going to Baha'i classes in the World Center, and he was saying, well, God, where's God? And the father said to me, I happened to be the Baha'i teacher trying to deal with this thing. He said, you know, it's not over till it's over. Friends, if you've got kids that are not behaving themselves the way you'd like, think of that in terms of it's not over till it's over. Everybody's going through different phases. How many times I've seen, particularly young girls, 13, 14, negating God when their parents are pioneering in some foreign country and the parents are dying saying, I sacrificed my whole life and now I've lost my children because I'm a pioneer. No. I know the girl that was the problem in Buenos Aires. She's got 3 kids. They're devoted to the faith. She's very active in the cause. I was in Hawaii and I met this boy that had the problem in the World Center years ago when he was 16, 17. He was happy to introduce me. He's very active in the cause. He introduced me to his son, who's the auxiliary board member, and the daughter, who's on the, I don't know what new institution we have there to deal with all these things. It's not over till it's over. So pray, continue to love these children no matter what phases they're going through. Society's in a very dark condition, as you're well aware. And friends, that's the end of the questions. Thank you very much.